everybody. Sam Amico, hoopswire.com, back with another 3-3-0 to go. Cavaliers NBA Hoops show. We are been very busy today. And by we, I mean myself and Ashish Mathur, who many of you may know, who also writes for hoopswire.com. Right off the bat today, very early, we found out the Cavaliers did, in fact, part ways with Coach J.B. Bickerstaff. I have a lot of thoughts on that. I have a lot of thoughts on who may be a replacement. And again, those are just basically thoughts. But also, I mean, this is really just the start to what should be a pretty busy offseason. And if not totally busy offseason, a season off-season full of rumors and innuendo and hints and allegations and all that kind of stuff. But, first let's start with JB Bickerstaff. And I posted this on my Facebook page. Just one of the nicest. I would say probably, I would think that there's probably like 25 people. I've been covering the NBA full time since 2007, 2008. And I would say there's been like 25 people who I just thought were just over the top, friendly, pleasant, personable, and very even keel. And I said this last week about JB Bickerstaff, but he's at the top of that list. As far as people I covered, his dad, Bronny Bickerstaff, who has been a senior advisor with the Cavs. You can see why JB's such a nice guy, because Bernie's the same thing. So let me just start with that. I mean, we're talking about two really incredible people. And it's not just me. It's not just my opinion because they were nice to me. They're that way with everybody. So, it's always tough when somebody like that's getting replaced. He doesn't get a chance to finish the job, so to speak. And I thought JB has done a nice job over his 5.5 years. I thought the team played hard for him. I think that he's, for the most part, been a solid coach, solid to better than average coach. But I also think that the Cavs made the right decision. All that said, that JB's a great dude. I think he's a better than average coach. I think he was growing as a coach. But I think it was time to move on. And that's just the way it is in the NBA, right? Most coaches get 3 years. Some only get one. Frank Vogel just got one. He won a championship with the Lakers, but he just got one with the Phoenix Suns. For those of you who follow not just the Cavs, but the entire NBA, you will see that JB getting 5.5 years actually made him almost one of the longest tenured coaches. But I think that there were some trouble spots that were evident after the All-Star break. And I kind of touched on these before in last week's show, but we saw that the Cavs were clunky. Now, yes, they had a lot of injuries after the All-Star break, particularly to Donovan Mitchell. But I think even when they were totally healthy, that series against Orlando, those first 4 games were not impressive. And I'm staying with the first 4 because that's when they had everybody before Jared Allen suffered a rib injury and was out for the rest of the playoffs. I feel like, those first 4 games, the Cavs should have been better when they had everybody. Clearly, the front office thought the same thing because they won those first 2 games at home pretty easily because the Magic, this was, the majority of their players' first experience in the playoffs, very young team. So they just looked overmatched. And I don't know how much the Cavs had to do with that. They just kind of played along and capitalized on the Magic suffering because they were new. And then you had games 3 and 4 in Orlando, and the Cavs were blown out of the gym and looked terrible. So, I think that the front office and most fans, and probably even the players and coaches, expected the Cavs to beat the Magic in 4 games, 5 games, not have to go 7 games with the Orlando Magic, who, no disrespect to them, but they were a young team, and young teams generally don't do well in the playoffs. And the Cavs had to come back from 18 points down at home in the deciding Game 7 against Orlando to get past them. It took really kind of a basketball miracle. It was the Cavs playing a lot better in that game and the Magic just self-destructing. Okay? So to me, that series right there is really where the Cavs kind of decided we need to be better than this. We should be further along than this. We should not struggle in the playoffs against a team that, while talented, ultra talented, and is on the rise in the Orlando Magic, they were playoff rookies. And we saw what happened last year when the Cavs were playoff rookies. That's why I excused their 5-game loss to the Knicks, because the Cavs, so many of them were new to the playoffs. Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, Isaac Okoro, Karis LeVert, Jared Allen barely had any experience. JB Bickerstaff barely had any playoff coaching experience last year. So I thought, yeah, they're probably going to lose to the Knicks. And people got upset with me at the time, but it doesn't make me any great expert. It just means I've been doing this forever, and I know what usually works in the playoffs, and that's veteran teams. Usually, not always. Minnesota Timberwolves probably aren't quite a veteran team, and they're in the Western Conference Finals. So, but most of the time, when you're the older team with playoff experience that has been there before, you're going to win a series fairly easily. The Cavs did not do that against Orlando Magic. I believe that is where, if the Cavs were teetering a little bit, and should we bring JB back? Is he the coach for this group? I believe that series against the Orlando Magic was the one that made the Cavs say, no, he's not the guy. He's a good coach. He's going to get us to a certain level, which he did, and they should be grateful for that. And I think that the Cavs are. We saw Dan Gilbert tweet out thanking JB for helping them during their rebuild and for really guiding it along. What Dan Gilbert left out, but what that tweet also says to me is, we don't think you're the guy who can get us from here to here. If there's even a shred of doubt about that, you let the coach go. Now, that said, first of all, I kind of figured this was coming today. And that was because I learned yesterday that Koby Altman is having a press conference tomorrow by himself, the president of basketball operations, at 11 a.m. tomorrow. And what I learned was there was not going to be JB Bickerstaff there. Dan Gilbert's not going to be there. So, I mean, sometimes that's not uncommon or unusual where the president of basketball operations or the GM will meet with the media by himself at the end of the year. So I wasn't reading too much into it. But I thought if JB got fired, it would be today because of that. And because Koby Altman had been at the NBA Combine, which is in Chicago, and scouting prospects for the draft. The Cavs actually have a draft pick this year, number 20. What do you know? So, which is rare because they traded away so many to land Donovan Mitchell with the Jets. But they have a draft pick this year. So Koby Altman was in Chicago scouting prospects at the NBA Combine. And then he went to Los Angeles, and he just got back from Los Angeles last night or this morning. And he was scouting there too. In Los Angeles, there's something called Pro Days, which is more scouting and evaluating talent for the NBA draft next month. And let me tell you guys, today was already a crazy day, but it may not be the end of things. Obviously, it's not. They still got to hire a coach, right? They're hoping to do that before the NBA draft, which I believe is June 20th. Now it's 2 days. First round one day, second round the next. Almost like the NFL draft, except the NFL draft has 7 rounds because there's so many more players. NBA has 2. I'm a proponent that I think the NBA should go back to 3 rounds, which I will talk about on an upcoming show without trying to get too sidetracked here. But so, JB Bickerstaff out as coach. I know most of you, at least based on my comments on Twitter and on our 330 to go page on YouTube, we're in favor of that. It seems like now that he's been fired, I'm seeing more comments of people who weren't in favor of it, but still the vast majority, this is just pro sports, right? You blame two people, the coach and the writer. No, I sometimes do hear from fans saying that I'm not doing enough to motivate the team, but other than that, it's usually the coach, right? Right or wrong, fair or not. And I talked about this last week on the show. I'm a huge Cleveland Browns fan, and the Browns are the one team I don't have to cover. I don't cover the Guardians anymore now. I used to cover them for Fox Sports Ohio. I'd fill in the summer sometimes, which I actually kind of miss, because now when I go to a Guardians game, I have to pay for it, which doesn't seem fair. But anyway, I know the emotions behind wanting a coach to, or wanting the team to move on from the coach. And again, I have come out and said, yeah, I think it's the right decision. I just think that, and Larry Bird many years ago used to have a line when he was a player, and he said, I feel as if every 3 years as a player, you're ready for a new voice. Doesn't mean you have to change the coach. Just means that as a player, NBA players, they kind of get ready for a new voice. We've heard, and we've had reports on hoopswire.com that Donovan Mitchell may not have been a huge JB Bickerstaff fan this last season. Maybe he was last year, Donovan Mitchell's first year in Cleveland. This past year, everything that's being reported is that Donovan Mitchell was questioning some of the rotations, thought he was playing too many minutes in games that probably, didn't warrant that many minutes. That was one of my personal things with JB Bickerstaff. I didn't think it's enough to fire a guy. And I'm not an NBA coach, so I could be in the wrong here. But one of the things I thought, one of my observations was, boy, he's really playing guys a lot in the regular season. Why aren't we seeing more of Sam Merrill? Why aren't we seeing more of Craig Porter Jr. when he was healthy? It seemed like Craig Porter Jr. and Sam Merrill were playing a ton. And then you bring back Darius Garland, or Darius Garland returns from injury, and we don't see those guys almost at all, which I thought you got to play some other guys, just to kind of give yourself a rest for the playoffs. But at the same time, I kind of understand if you're a coach, you're fighting for playoff positioning. You want to win every game, every regular season game to a coach is like the playoffs. So, I get it. That said, yes, I agree. It was time to move on. And there's a whole bunch of candidates, right? I've heard today alone there are almost a dozen candidates. We've heard the names Kenny Atkinson, who's an assistant coach with the Golden State Warriors, who's been up for a lot of jobs over the past few years. I thought he did an excellent job, and he was actually fired. He was the head coach of the Brooklyn Nets, and I thought he did a great job there. And then got fired, if you remember, the day before the season, before the NBA just shut down in 2020 because of COVID. It was Kenny Atkinson fired. The next day, the NBA shuts down, and then they wait 3 months to go play in the bubble at Walt Disney. So I think Kenny Atkinson would be a strong candidate. Again, I think here there are a lot of things to consider. And James Borrego, who's assistant with the New Orleans Pelicans, David Griffin's team, who was the coach of the Charlotte Hornets. And the Hornets were great when he was there in terms of the way they improved. They improved in Borrego's last 3 years, they improved by 10 wins each season. So even after improving the team by 20 wins or 25 wins or 30 wins from his first year, they fired him. Charlotte fired him. But a lot of people are really high on James Borrego. He comes from that San Antonio Spurs coaching tree, with Greg Popovich, Brett Brown, who was with the Sixers and did a pretty good job there. So I think there are a lot of people that are high on James Borrego. Now, that said, I know, again, the Cavs are casting a very wide net. I think maybe, and I could be wrong here, but I think maybe because the players are so high on Luke Walton, who coached the Lakers, coached the Sacramento Kings, and played for the Cavs, and obviously the son of NBA legend Bill Walton. He's an assistant with the Cavs this past season. I know all the players really liked him and really respected him. Do they just move him over a chair? I don't think it's that easy. I don't think it's that simple. I think it's something that they may consider. But I know, listen, Dan Gilbert is back involved with the team, okay? He wasn't as much. Obviously, he had the stroke and the health issues. For a while there, he was allowing one of his boys to kind of act as de facto owner. And I think everything I've heard was Dan Gilbert was set to let his son be the owner for the most part, with Dan focusing on other things, his health, Rocket Mortgage, and other things. Everything I've heard is his son was like, after a couple of years, nah, I'm good, Dad. Don't want to run the basketball team. Don't want to oversee the team. So what I've noticed, even just on social media, but I know that Dan is back involved, and that's a good thing, because I think he brings a fire to the organization that they need. He brings passion. He likes to make a splash. And there's nothing wrong with trying to make a splash as long as you get it right. You don't want to make a splash. John Beilein, for instance, was kind of a splashy hire. Didn't work out. You don't need a splash. I think Dan does realize that now. So they're going to make the best, the decision based on who they feel is the best candidate. The coach at Oklahoma City, Mark Daigneault, just won NBA Coach of the Year after that franchise got totally turned around, and nobody heard of this guy when he got hired, right? He was a former assistant, longtime assistant, never been a head coach. Taylor Jenkins in Memphis last year was in running for Coach of the Year before all the injuries and all the Jay Morant nonsense. And he had the Grizzlies at number 2 seed in the Western Conference. Nobody heard of Taylor Jenkins before he took the Memphis Grizzlies job. These are very low profile hires that ended up working out, showing that you don't have to make a splash. Now, again, I'm good with a splash. I love a splash. My website thoroughly enjoys a splash, because people come to read and talk and listen when there's a splash. But I think that the Cavs are going to make their best decision. Let me tell you a story about Dan Gilbert. When I think it was before the Cavs, after they had fired Mike Brown the second time in 2014, right before LeBron James came back, I wrote a story that at that time the Cavs were considering Kentucky coach, now Arkansas coach, John Calipari. This is right a couple of weeks before LeBron James returned, right, in 2014. Dan Gilbert knew that LeBron liked John Calipari, and it would be a huge splashy hire, right? So I wrote, what was told to me was that the Cavs were considering John Calipari. David Griffin calls me. David Griffin, who is the GM at the time. At that time, he had just gotten the GM job. And he says, we're not considering John Calipari. We haven't talked to him. And I had to let him know. I had to say, you're not talking to him, but your owner is. And he went, oh, okay, thanks. I got to go. I mean, so there was, this is a decade ago. So I think things have changed, but maybe not. Maybe not. And at that time, Dan Gilbert, the owner of the Cavs, was saying to the front office, without actually saying it, you guys do your basketball search. I'll conduct mine. So, I mean, and again, not uncommon in pro sports where the owner, for instance, if John Calipari at the time were interested, or Tom Izzo, who we always hear because Dan Gilbert went to Michigan State. They tried to hire him before. At least Dan did. I don't think Dan's going to say, hey, I hired John Calipari, Koby Altman, so that's our guy. I think what he would say is, hey, John Calipari, I talked to him. I'm interested, or he's interested in the job. Let's set up something. That's okay. You own the team. So I don't know that that's going to be the case this time. I don't think it is. I think Dan will have his suggestions on who might be a good coach, the next coach, but Koby Altman's ultimately handling the search. And Koby knows the NBA, right? And Dan knows that. Dan knows that Koby Altman is constantly in NBA circles. Dan is not. Dan Gilbert is managing and running his business and, overseeing a whole host of people who run multiple businesses for him, including the Cavs. So this coaching search is going to be led by Koby Altman. And let me say this because this is the key to everything. I do believe that they may not go right to Donovan Mitchell, the Cavs, Koby Altman. May not go right to him, but they will get wind somehow of guys he likes. They know already guys he likes. We keep hearing the name of the Jensen character coach who used to be the coach of the Cleveland Charge. And I think that's a possibility because he was an assistant coach Jensen was assistant coach with the Utah Jazz when Donovan Mitchell was there. And Donovan Mitchell really liked that staff. Quinn Snyder, now the coach in Atlanta. I'll tell you this, Quinn Snyder were available, he'd be the Cavs coach. There's no question about that. Donovan Mitchell's come out and said his favorite coach he's ever played for was Quinn Snyder. They have a very tight bond, very close, but Quinn Snyder is not going anywhere. He's the head coach of the Hawks. They really like him there. The players really like him. He's a player's coach, and they believe he's going to be successful there. So, I think that there's a lot of input without them asking if that's possible. And it is. We know who Donovan Mitchell likes. We know who some of the people he respects are. And maybe he respects James Borrego and Kenny Atkinson. We don't know. The Cavs will find that out, and I don't think they'll even have to ask Donovan directly. They might do that too. But, we've heard in Los Angeles, LeBron James wants nothing to do with that coaching search. I believe Donovan Mitchell feels about the same in Cleveland, that he wants very little to do with the coaching search. So James Borrego, Kenny Atkinson, I said that I know that Frank Vogel, who led the Lakers to a championship, didn't really do much with the Phoenix Suns this year, although I don't blame Frank Vogel for that. They just seem poorly constructed. And again, here's a coach taking the fall. I'm not saying that I think the Cavs need to hire Frank Vogel. I just know with his experience and his, repertoire and resume, he's got to be a strong candidate. You think back to when, in the 2010 to 2014, it was Frank Vogel's Indiana Pacers that were constantly battling LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh and the Heatles back then. The Pacers were the one team that everybody thought could beat the Heat, and Frank Vogel was the coach then. So I think that's a possibility. To me, Frank Vogel always does well with a good roster. If you give him a poorly constructed roster or a young team, he's not going to do so well. And I think that's true of most coaches, but it seems really true of Frank Vogel. I also heard Terry Stotts. I tweeted that out. Terry Stotts, a name on the radar. People don't like it because it's not splashy and he's a retread. Let me tell you this. Terry Stotts is Damian Lillard's closest ally. Not that Damian Lillard would come to the Cavs, but that, when you have a star player who respects you the way Damian Lillard does Terry Stotts, then other stars respect you. And the word has gotten out that Terry Stotts is a very good coach. And guess what? He led the Blazers to the playoffs 8 straight years, Terry Stotts. And they haven't been back since he left. Now, granted, the roster's undergone some construction there. But sometimes a veteran coach who's laid back like Stotts is exactly what a team needs. I don't know that. This is, like I always say, this isn't my job. Nobody's paying me to figure this out. I'm getting paid to talk about it, write about it, but I don't get paid to be the absolute expert. I'm not in the room in these conversations. I wish I were, because then I could offer some advice, and say, yeah, don't hire that guy. He's too short, which I hope that's not a reason people wouldn't get hired, or I'd never have a job. But so, the number one priority really isn't the coach. It's not the draft next month. It's not any trades. As we know, it's Donovan Mitchell re-signing or agreeing to a contract extension, frankly, before July. So we've got about a month of that. Now, I've run multiple stories on the website. I've said it here multiple times. The Cavs are very optimistic that Donovan Mitchell will re-sign that contract extension. I haven't asked the Cavs if they're optimistic about that. I've seen the reports. I've aggregated them on the website. I have asked opposing GMs, scouts, a couple of agents, not Donovan Mitchell or his agent, but others. And I've texted around, and everything I'm getting is, oh, yeah, he's re-signing in Cleveland. Now, they're saying that as if they know. I don't think they know. I think that they've been led to believe that, when they're putting out these feelers for Donovan Mitchell, maybe through his agent or maybe through people who know his family or Donovan Mitchell himself, maybe they're all getting a vibe. That's how these things work in league circles, is sometimes you don't, GMs and execs, they can't tamper. And because frankly, Donovan Mitchell's still under contract, not only now, but until next summer. So they can't talk to him. They can't call him and say, hey, we want you to come to our team. What are you thinking about doing with this contract? They can't do that. So I can do it. I've asked. Numerous media members have asked, but we haven't asked since the end of the season. And when you did ask, he said, I'm going to think at the end of the season. I'll figure that out. Or more, I think what the vibe I was getting from him was, yeah, I know what I'm doing, but I'm not telling you guys right now. So I think that, there are things for him to think about. For those of you who have regular jobs, not like some weird NBA writing job. But, and this has happened to me in my career, you get an offer and you think, well, I've been with this situation for so many years. How stable is it? What kind of money am I getting to stay here? Is it worth it? I have left a job that was pretty much going to double my salary. So it's not always about the money, but it has to be about, how content am I, and how is this setting me up for the future? Do I feel like I can potentially win a championship here? Do they treat me well? So I think that we've heard the reports Donovan Mitchell is happy. Adrian Wojnarowski, ESPN, there's no bigger NBA insider who said he spoke to Donovan Mitchell and Donovan Mitchell told him he's happy in Cleveland. Shams Charania of The Athletic, who's probably the number 2 or 1A, and sometimes one NBA insider has said that the Cavs are very optimistic. So it's sounding like, Donovan Mitchell, I'd be surprised if I would be stunned, more stunned than 2010 when LeBron James left for the Miami Heat. If Donovan Mitchell doesn't sign an extension, because the Cavs can pay him more than anybody else. They're willing to obviously make him the face of the franchise. I'm sure that he knows that Dan Gilbert will spare no expense, even with the new collective bargaining agreement that charges teams out the wazoo for going over the salary cap or the salary apron. I don't think that bothers Dan Gilbert. I mean, it's not an issue for him. And he's shown that when LeBron James was here. I'm sure that he would show it again for Donovan Mitchell, and that's been conveyed to Donovan Mitchell. So, Cavs need a new coach. No clue who that's going to be, right? It's way too early to say. 8, 9 hours when I'm coming to you live here from the time JB was fired, who I think he will resurface as an assistant somewhere and for next season. But I certainly hope so, because I hope to run into him again. But I think that, Donovan Mitchell, let's just say he resigns, okay? Gut feeling. People ask me my gut feeling. My gut feeling is he resigns. That said, I don't always listen to my gut, because sometimes it tells me to go to Taco Bell at midnight, and I end up regretting it. So the gut's not always right. But the gut is telling me Donovan Mitchell will be back in Cleveland with a 4-year maximum contract extension before next season. So we got that settled, right? Okay, now we're hearing talk that Darius Garland's agent, Rich Paul, is going to request a trade if Donovan Mitchell signs that extension. Okay. I think the Cavs were ready to move on anyway. I don't think they're desperate to move on. Don't get me wrong. They would love to see Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell work. I think that they have their doubts that it ever will after seeing it for 2 years. Darius Garland had a terrible season, right? We covered this already last week, but there's just, you can't move forward when your point guard, you're not just relying on him to be solid or even good. You want him to develop into an all-star. Now, I think part of that's on the Cavs that he hasn't. I don't think it's all Darius Garland. I don't know that they put him in great positions to succeed a lot, but I also think we've seen enough to know that Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell aren't a match. When's the last time 2 6'1" guards went to the NBA Finals and won a championship? Maybe it's happened. Maybe Bob Cousy and whoever his backcourt mate was in the 50s. I don't know. But it sure doesn't happen very often. And I think that the Cavs gave it a shot. They wanted to go all in to get Donovan Mitchell. And Darius Garland played the best basketball of his career when Donovan Mitchell wasn't on the team. It's not Donovan Mitchell's fault. It's not Darius Garland's fault. I wouldn't even say it's JB Bickerstaff's fault. Just sometimes you don't mesh with a coworker. They mesh great in terms of personality. They really like each other. But, love isn't enough, as they say sometimes. And really, that's where the Cavs are with Darius Garland. I think it'd be a sad thing, really, for them to have to trade him. Because 2 years ago, well, put it this way, last summer I suggested that the Cavs might look into trading Darius Garland. And the blowback was fierce, right? So I think that that's something that we've got to consider, is that you really had high hopes for Darius Garland, and now you're casting him away because you're not going to get much in return. You're going to get salary match. What you ideally would like to get, obviously you're not trading him if you can't get a starter. You're going to get one starter, but is that starter going to be a point guard? Is it going to be a wing? Is it going to be a borderline all-star? Again, I know I've seen Brandon Ingram from the Pelicans mentioned. I don't think there's any way the Cavs would have to throw in something else. If I'm the Pelicans, if I'm David Griffin, I'm like, I used to be Koby Altman's boss. I'd be like, yeah, what are you talking about? We're not taking Darius Garland coming off a terrible season for a guy who's really our second best player, in Brandon Ingram. So I think that's a long shot. I've seen Cam Johnson and maybe somebody else from the Nets. I think that's a possibility. I would think something like that's a possibility, where you're getting a good shooter like a Cam Johnson. That would be ideal. But you're going to need a point guard. You're going to need two. Craig Porter Jr. is not ready to take over the team, number one. Number two, he can't shoot from the outside. But I love the kid. I mean, he's going to be a fantastic player. I just don't know that his ceiling is starter. I think his ceiling is, I'll come off the bench and be a lot better than the other bench players. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's got a ceiling as a starter, but who knows? Who knows? He exceeded expectations last year, this season as a rookie season, as a rookie. So maybe, but I think even if Craig Porter Jr. is your guy, which I guarantee you the Cavs don't think that right now. But even if they did, you still need a veteran point guard. So sadly, I do believe that Darius Garland will be traded. I don't know where, but that's all going to be contingent on Donovan Mitchell signing the extension. If Donovan Mitchell doesn't sign the extension, Darius Garland will be back. Donovan Mitchell will be traded. That's really a worst case scenario, but that's what will happen. And if Donovan Mitchell signs that extension and Rich Paul requests that Darius Garland's traded, I don't even think Rich Paul has to request it. I think the Cavs would have done it anyway. I think they're ready to move on from Darius Garland. One bad year. I mean, it was bad though, and you think he could bounce back. You know what I mean? I know that there's not a lot of patience. Certainly not for fans, and really not for the front office. You have a bad year, that's it. Now, my concern with Darius Garland is you trade him to the Washington Wizards, and all of a sudden he becomes, the next Kyrie Irving or Isaiah Thomas, the real Isaiah Thomas, not the one who had one good year in Boston, who's my height. So that's my fear with Darius Garland, is that he pulls it together. But again, he may never pull it together totally playing next to Donovan Mitchell. And again, I believe that the Cavs they could use, Max Strus at shooting guard, run Donovan Mitchell playing some points, and get another 6'7", 6'8" small forward who can shoot. I don't know the answer right now. I think that these are all things that the Cavs are going to figure out once you get Donovan Mitchell under contract for 4 more years. That's the key. And then you do that, then the possibilities truly are endless. There's going to be teams who are interested in Darius Garland. I already know the San Antonio Spurs are, and the San Antonio Spurs have some nice players that they could give back, and picks. So, I think that's the kind of deal you're going to make. You're going to be making it with a team that's young, and Garland would go there. And again, I really think if there were a trade, the two most logical partners are the Spurs and the Wizards. And I think that is where the Cavs would put their focus on. We're hearing some things, rumblings out of Oklahoma City, but I don't know. Maybe, then all of a sudden you're making a deal for like a Josh Giddey or something. Is he a better fit? He's certainly bigger. He's certainly more of a consummate point guard that delivers the ball quickly. I don't know, and is that something Oklahoma City wants? Because they've done so well. They feel like Darius Garland would put them over the top. So I think you're really looking at teams that aren't as good making a deal for Darius Garland, as opposed to a team that's way over the top, like the Jazz did when they were gutting their roster and took Colin Sexton and Larry Markkinen for Donovan Mitchell, obviously picks, and OG Abaji, who's now with the Raptors. So, and Toronto, I've heard, could be a possibility for Garland as well. So we'll cross that bridge as all the rumors begin to unfold. I feel like I've been talking for like an hour and I haven't really covered anything. So let me go back to my bullet points, which is what I do in my dribbles columns for you who read them. You think I'm doing them for the readers. Everybody's like, oh, I like how you number your sentences. Well, I'm glad that you like that, but I'm doing it for me. Because otherwise, you've heard me on here. My thoughts are just like, woo! I'm like a one-man Disneyland up here. So I have to kind of, get organized in my thoughts. I've talked about JB. He's gone. Don't know the replacement. I will say this. I try not to direct you to the website too often. But in this case, we're going to have every possibility of every coach, of everything we're hearing on hoopswire.com. We just will. I mean, that's what we do. I don't know that I'm good at anything else. Like my son's, he has a little costume that zipper came off. I spent 40 minutes trying to fix it today. guess what? It's still not good. It's still not zipping. So I don't know. Anybody has any suggestions for a zipper that's run off the tracks? Text me or call or do something, because I clearly can't do it. So we'll have all that stuff on HoopsWire. Coaching candidates, Donovan Mitchell, what the speculation is, what he finally does. Those are the two biggies, okay? The entire offseason is centered on that. The Cavs have a draft pick, which nobody cares about because this draft is not viewed as very good, and the Cavs pick is number 20. They have to make a pick. They cannot trade it. Thanks to former Cavs owner 40 years ago, 45 years ago almost now, Ted Stepien, who traded all the Cavs draft picks, including one that would have been James Worthy, the Lakers great. He traded that pick away, but at least in return he got Disco Don Ford, who was a terrible NBA player, but had cool hair and a cool nickname. So because of Ted Stepien, you cannot trade picks in back-to-back years. The NBA had to protect the owners from themselves. So that rule is still in place, and it's all because of the Cleveland Cavaliers. So the Cavs, listen to this, they can't trade the number 20 pick right now. They can trade it after they draft somebody. So say the Cavs want to move the number 20 pick, they work out a deal to trade the number 20 pick to, say, the Los Angeles Clippers. Well, they can't say, the Clippers have acquired the number 20 pick from the Cavs. Can't be done. Nobody can do that. The Cavs, however, can draft, Sam Amico, which I highly would advise, at number 20, and then trade that player's rights to the Clippers. So it's really a formality. If they want to trade the pick, they can before the guy ever even plays the game for them. But they just can't trade it ahead of the draft. That's all. So I think that that's in play. I think that the Cavs are they're probably thinking, we don't want another rookie. That's my guess. Unless they feel like, hey, this guy was on our draft board. The way these teams draft, every last one of them has a draft board where they list guys like 1 to 200. Okay? And they just cross guys off their draft board on draft night. So it's a no-brainer when it comes to their pick. They're not sitting there debating. It's like, here's who we have at number 20. This is who we're taking. Now, most of the time, you have the number 20 pick, for instance, and you say, hey, the guy that we have ranked number 12 is still sitting there. That's our guy. There's no debate. And every team runs their draft. They have their drafts set up this way. Now, sometimes those things can get thrown for a loop with trades, other teams making trades ahead of your pick, and you're getting a little confused. And, hey, maybe now we want to get this big guy because we need to get bigger. So sometimes you get thrown off, but usually you know who you're taking at 20. I think the Cavs draft board at number 20, the guy they have ranked at number 20, they don't want. That's just nothing from them, just what I'm hearing. And so they would probably take a player there, try to move him, even for a veteran. You're not going to get, you're not going to get much for the number 20 pick, but maybe you move into the second round, draft Bronny James. I don't know. I don't think that that's out of the realm of possibility for the Cavs. Bronny did grow up in Akron. They could use the whole thing like we're bringing him home again. I wouldn't put it past him. I wouldn't put it past him to maybe draft Bronny at 20 if he's still there. And I know, I'm treading lightly here because I know that this is going to anger fans. Everybody knows Bronny's not an NBA player right now. He's just not. He's not ready for the NBA. He may never be. I don't know. I think that he deserves a little leeway because he had a major heart scare before the start of the season last year. Now, if Bronny James didn't have his dad as his dad, if Bronny James' name were Joe Smith and he played at USC, I'm positive we wouldn't be mentioning him as a potential NBA draft pick. I hope that everybody knows that. I'm also just fine with the fact that he may get drafted because he's LeBron's son. I'm fine with that. Because Bronny, number one, I've known, I'm not tight with him by any stretch. I've known and seen him around, having started covering the Cavs when he was, 3 years old, to maybe even younger than that, to seeing him around the locker room, seeing him grow up. He's a first-class kid. LeBron raised, and his wife Savannah raised their kids right. Let me tell you, they are just top-notch people. Bronny, Bryce, and you got to forgive me, I can't remember the daughter's name, and I've never run into her, but I'm sure she's just like the boys, and I'm sure she's, they're great. So I'm okay with Bronny James getting drafted because not just because he's a really good kid, and I'm okay with him getting drafted just because he's LeBron's son, because here's why. He's a basketball celebrity. That's good enough. You're going to move merchandise. You're going to sell tickets. He may not even get in the game, but he's LeBron's kid. I don't think LeBron is going to come to the team that drafts Bronny. I just don't. I'm getting that vibe from his camp that, love to play with Bronny. That would be a dream. Not going to do anything in my power to just go to that team that takes him. So, if the Cavs don't feel good about their number 20 pick, why not? Wouldn't you be excited? I know the majority of fans would be excited. They would feel, the diehards would be like, oh, they wasted a pick. Bronny's not an NBA player. So what? So what? The diehards aren't going to pay the bills. I've always said that as a diehard in sports. We don't pay the bills. We have opinions. We have strong opinions. We have a strong, tight community. But diehards don't pay the bills. It's the casuals. The casuals pay the bills. And when you're a business like NBA teams are, and the league is, the idea is to pay the bills and make a profit. Every business wants to make a profit. How do you do that? Part of the way is potentially drafting a basketball celebrity. Not necessarily a pro basketball player, but a pro basketball celebrity. I think it's something to think about. So I will say, to me, that Bronny James is going to get drafted by somebody, right? Maybe the Lakers at 17. I think more likely the Lakers at 55. If I had to pick who Bronny James is going to get drafted by, it'd be the Los Angeles Lakers late in the draft, 5 picks before the draft ends. That would be my guess. Rich Paul is his agent, just like he is LeBron's agent. And, Rich is very, obviously, very committed to all his clients. And I think that he got, and I think I talked about this last time on the show, he got, the name is escaping me, Chris Livingston from Akron, went to Bukdal, went to Western Reserve Academy briefly. Chris Livingston was not an NBA player. He's still not an NBA player. Well, last year, Rich said he's got a commitment from a team that's going to draft him. And I wrote something to the effect of, who would make a commitment to Chris Livingston at this point in his career? I'm all for Akron guys getting drafted. Don't get me wrong. I love the kid. I saw him play a few times. It's not about how I feel about the kid or the individual. I just thought, why would anybody commit to, I wrote the story, to commit to drafting Chris Livingston? He's clearly not ready for the NBA. He played his freshman year at Kentucky, averaged like 5 points a game. I heard from Rich Paul after that, I will add. And Rich has said, it's not always about, and Rich will contact me and say things like this. Sam, I respect you. I like you. And then I know, here comes the knockout blow. But he has said, look, it's the scouts who say that Chris Livingston isn't ready, or the GMs. a lot of those guys aren't right all the time, right? I mean, somebody thought it was a great idea to draft Anthony Bennett at number 1, right? So they missed. They missed on Craig Porter Jr., right? He didn't even get drafted. And here he is, had a wonderful rookie year and won the hearts of Cavs fans everywhere. So Rich is right. Rich is right that they don't always, scouts and GMs aren't always right. And guess what? They did have a commitment. Number 60 with the final pick in the 2023 NBA draft, the Milwaukee Bucks took Chris Livingston. That was a commitment. And I could see Rich steering Bronny to the Lakers. Hey, letting other teams know, don't draft him. He wants to play with his dad, or his dad wants to play with him. Everything we're hearing from Bronny, by the way, is it's not important to me to play with my dad. Be nice. I can tell you this. I have a 19-year-old, and if I played in the NBA, he would be like, yeah, Dad, I like you and love you and all, but I don't really want to be your teammate. I want to make my own mark in the NBA. And that's kind of what Bronny said at the NBA Combine is, I want to be able to separate myself from that. I want to be good enough. He acknowledged, look, right now, the only reason anybody knows who I am or what kind of player I am is because of my dad, but I want to separate myself from that. I want to work hard enough and become good enough. He was very, very cordial and mature beyond his years in relaying this. And it makes sense. I want to make my own mark in the world, or at least in the game. And so I don't think Bronny cares if he gets drafted by the Lakers. I think LeBron would love it, as any father would. So I wouldn't be surprised. That said, I think I have a hunch that Rich Paul would be okay if Bronny ended up with the Cavs. I think he'd like to see him with the Lakers or the Cavs. I don't think he wants to see him with the Utah Jazz. Now, that said, the Utah Jazz are extending an invite to Bronny to have him go work out for them individually. Again, if his name's Joe Smith, he may not be getting these invites. And if he did get an invite, he wouldn't think twice about it. Yes, I'm coming. Maybe Bronny will do that. But maybe they're going to put the message out, look, we only want to go to 2 or 3 teams. And again, basketball celebrity, good. You have it. You have things in your control just because you're a basketball celebrity. And I guess I've said that, take a drink every time I say it. But it's really true. I mean, you look at people like Caitlin Clark with Iowa. Now, obviously, there's a difference there in terms of their production in the college game. Caitlin Clark, college basketball's all-time leading scorer. There's a reason that she became so big. It wasn't because of her dad's name. Bronny, we all know who he is because of his father. We're probably going to know the same thing about Bryce in a year or two. So they're very talented players, don't get me wrong. And I think, Bronny reminds me a lot of a guy was years ago named Felipe Lopez, who I'm sure none of you remember. He was the number 1 ranked player coming out of high school. He went to St. John's, played all 4 years there, spent a little bit of time with the Timberwolves, was like a 6'3" shooting guard. Didn't play point guard, was more of a shooting guard. Wasn't going to score a lot of NBA points, but was a solid guy off the bench, solid defender who could knock down the occasional shot. I think that's Bronny's ceiling. There's nothing wrong with that. Every NBA team needs that, but that's probably who Bronny is. He's not, Joe Dumars or Luka Doncic or, he's not LeBron. And everybody knows that. But that said, and I know I've talked about him a lot, but I think that it's a good thing that he's going to get an opportunity in the NBA because of his dad. And I think that that's just fine. So could the Cavs draft Bronny at 20? That was my 20-minute rant to say yes, they could at 20. or they could move around and draft him. I think the only way that the Cavs won't consider draft, and guess what? The diehards who don't pay the bills, but we keep the conversation going, are going to be really mad if the Cavs draft Bronny. I'll think, yeah, this is great. Give me his T-shirt. I'm a grown man. I'll buy the Bronny James T-shirt. I don't care. My kids will be jealous. They'll be like, Dad, aren't you a little old to be sporting the T-shirt of a 19-year-old? And I'll say, no, because it's Bronny James, baby. So anyway, and I really, you know what? I'll tell you this. I don't wear T-shirts with names on them or players or any of that just because I cover them. So I it's kind of a conflict of interest. Put it this way, if I walked around as much as I wanted to with a James Jones Cavs shirt on because I had such a great relationship with him, the other Cavs would probably be like, oh, so he's favoring James Jones. Or they would say, mostly, I think this is what they would say, well, we never read anything he writes, but the fact that he's wearing a James Jones jersey as a grown man is really weird. So that's why I didn't get one. Otherwise, or at least wear it. Maybe I have one. You just don't know it. You just don't wear it around. So I'm okay with Bronny. I think that the Cavs, are going to have some decisions to make, obviously, that are much bigger. Coach, Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, you're going to have to try to get, the Cavs are going to have much leverage, because Rich Paul's saying, or we're hearing that Rich Paul is going to request a trade. And that takes the Cavs leverage in a trade out because the other teams are like, well, you have to trade him now. The Cavs are probably going to tell those other teams, yeah, we were going to trade him anyway, so we're not taking just your scrubs. We want something good back for a fine young man and a good player. So you got that. We're hearing a lot about Jared Allen, right? There are a lot of teams who would love to have him. The Cavs are going to get all kinds of calls about Jared Allen. I'd be real careful about gutting the roster. You're already moving Darius Garland, presumably, right? If Donovan Mitchell resigns, that's it for me. That's it. Everybody else is back. If we have to throw in somebody, George Niang, I know many of you would be happy if they threw him in a Darius Garland trade. I don't know. Dean Wade, maybe. Dean Wade, I like. Just never around for the playoffs, really. But a fine defender. Isaac Okoro's a restricted free agent. Resign him, throw him in a Darius Garland trade. I don't know. But beyond that, I'm not gutting my roster. Here's why. The Cavs, and I posted this on Amico Hoops Facebook page in response to a comment. They said JB may have been a nice guy, but the Cavs weren't getting far enough with him. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my alert, something on my website that says Donovan Mitchell was aggravated about something involving JB Bickerstaff. I didn't write that one. Ashish wrote it, but I just want to see what it was. So, lost my train of thought as I often do. Again, Disneyland. Oh, I think that you got to be real careful about gutting the roster because the comment on Amico Hoops said, well, JB may have been a nice guy, but that doesn't make him the coach of the team, blah, 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 which is really true. But my response was, the Cavs could have had Phil Jackson, as head coach and being assisted by Red Auerbach, and they weren't getting past the Boston Celtics, even totally healthy. They weren't going to beat them this year. So I don't think you can blame that all on coaching. My point is that they got to where they thought they would get, which is the second round of the playoffs. It didn't always look pretty. It was clunky. Should have beat Orlando in 4 or 5, no more than 6. I get all that. They weren't getting past the Boston Celtics. They weren't built for that right now, the Cavs. Celtics went 64-18. Cavs went 48-34 in the regular season. They're not getting past them. If they are, it's a major upset, and then JB Bickerstaff still has his job, right? So I would say do not gut this team. Doesn't need gutted. They need more time together. They need Donovan Mitchell. They need, in my opinion, Evan Mobley take the next step under the new coach, whoever that is. And Evan Mobley's already a master defensively. So is Jared Allen. Jared Allen was a double-double machine this year. Even though he didn't make the All-Star team, he was an All-Star. You don't trade him. If you're already trading Darius Garland, all of a sudden you're giving up your whole team and you're starting from scratch with not only a whole team, but a new coach, right? So I just think that you have to, you can't, this isn't fantasy basketball. Guys need time. They're human beings who need time to come together. So you start again next year, guess what? You're probably not even getting the second round of playoffs. I don't care if you have Donovan Mitchell and LeBron James. You need time, so, and a new coach. Now, it's not always the case, but Jared Allen's beloved by his teammates. That's huge. Everybody loves him. You can't always say that about guys. You know why? Because he's selfless. And he doesn't demand the basketball. Here's a guy that doesn't need the basketball to get a double-double. He just gets it off of everybody else's misses and mess and forces nothing. He defends like crazy. It's going to be hard to replace. If you go out and say, the New Orleans Pelicans, again, will give us Brandon Ingram for Jared Allen. Okay, now you have a hole to fill. Now you got to find a center. Now you got to find a guy who doesn't need the basketball who can help you be successful. I think that you have to be very careful about that. If you want to have a team that the whole reason of hiring a new coach is to get you to another level, right? So you got to be careful about changing personnel, because as one GM once famously said to me, we're talking about people here. They're not vacuum cleaners. You don't just replace them and get a better one that works. You need somebody who fits as a team in a team setting and as a unit. Yes, it helps to have a guy like prime LeBron James. Well, guess how often they come along? Once every 30 years. Prime Giannis Antetokounmpo got you a title, but it hasn't done anything since. Prime Kevin Durant won with the Golden State Warriors, but he hasn't done anything since. It didn't do much before. I mean, he's a great player. Don't get me wrong. These guys are great players, and they're going to help you. But it's guys like, going back to Bill Russell, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Wilt Chamberlain, LeBron James. I'm sure I'm missing a few in there. Maybe Kobe Bryant. I don't know. My point is, those guys, they don't come along very often. So the only way to win is to win as a unit and as a team. It helps to have one star or two, but you've got to do it as a team. And I think if you're gutting the team that's gotten you to the second round of playoffs this year, that could be a problem, especially unless you're bringing in another superstar, not a superstar, but a star who fits with Donovan Mitchell. Because remember, the Cavs won 17-18 in January, right? Didn't have Darius Garland, didn't have Evan Mobley. And they won 17-18. People say, it was the competition, blah, blah, blah. You don't play 18 easy games in the NBA. That's not possible. It's just not possible. You can't do that. So my point is that I think that if you're going to trade Darius Garland, you're going to have to kind of stand pat after that. Then, you know what? You don't have to make every trade this summer. If you feel like it, next year in December or January, we're not really going where we want to go, that's when you can make a trade before the February trade deadline. That's like February 10th every year. You can make another trade then. If you feel like there's a move then that'll put you over the top, do it then. You don't have to do it all before the season. You've got enough going on already. You've got Donovan Mitchell. You've got a coaching change. You've got to figure out what to do with Darius Garland. You've got Evan Mobley's contract coming up in terms of, signing him to a max deal soon. And then Isaac Okoro is a restricted free agent. So, I mean, you've got a lot going on this summer. Don't throw in a Jared Allen trade just because you don't want him back before the season. And I know that the Cavs do. I'm saying just because the fans do. So I just think, sometimes we need to take a step back, have a little bit of perspective. That's not what this show is about. This show is all over the place. But as far as the team goes, just take a step back, kind of approach it with some reason. And you know what? They did get to the second round of the playoffs. Their goal is to get a round further next year. And I think they're certainly capable. I think they're capable as is. It's not a popular opinion. I think they're capable as is. I think they just need another year together. And that's how it often goes. We look at the Denver Nuggets, who everybody was freaking out about for, keeping Mike Malone as coach for 8 years, all this stuff. Well, and they got to the championship, won the championship last year. Probably should have won it this year. I don't know what happened. Meltdown in Denver. But they did win one. They got one because they stuck it out. They wrote it out. And they made small trades. They got Aaron Gordon. They got Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Nice players, starters. But these aren't like huge splashes. And I think that's the direction the Cavs need to go. Add to what you have. If there's addition by subtraction with Darius Garland and the coach, then you do that. But beyond that, you're remaking an entire team that's been pretty good. Not great, not a championship, not LeBron James with Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving. You're not going to get that again. If you do, it's going to be a while. So you try to win as a team and you build on what you've done so far, which is made a natural progression. JB Bickerstaff said it after he got fired. After the season ended. Went to the play-in tournament, went to the first round, went to the Eastern Conference semifinals. Those are each the next natural step. So you don't want to just all of a sudden, you're getting closer. You don't want to just sudden, scrap everything. Boston Celtics aren't that powerful. You can beat them with the right changes. I believe that. The Indiana Pacers should have beat them the other night, game one, if they didn't dribble the ball off their foot. Could have put me in the game if they just want people to dribble the ball off their foot. I can do that. And well, I might add. That said, we've been at this an hour. If you're still with me, thank you so much. And I'm sure there's a lot of other topics to cover. We will have it all on HoopsWire. I saw Ashish just posted a new story about Donovan Mitchell. There's so many stories about Donovan Mitchell on my website, I haven't even read them all. So I don't blame you if you don't either. But that said, thanks for joining me. It's been a great time. I love talking Cavs with you. Clearly, I have a lot to say and a lot of opinions. And next week, I suspect, again, that the Cavs want to hire a coach before the NBA draft so that they can kind of get a feel for things at the draft. I wouldn't be surprised if they have a coach in two weeks, maybe 3. So, and we should know more about Donovan Mitchell, I think, within the next month, if not sooner. So anyway, thanks so much for joining, and we will talk to you next week.